this is always such a great event for me. Many of you know that this is Wayne State's 150th birthday, the sesquicentennial year for us, so it's a special year for us, but it's also the 100th anniversary of Wayne State's athletic program. And so that's something to also be very happy and also celebrate it. 100 years, a century-long legacy that every time I go to an event like this, I just reminded of such a rich heritage that we have here in athletics. The event over the weekend, the W Day, was just another phenomenal event. Again, that just shows many of the firsts that Wayne State has had with respect to athletics. It really is a very special year for the 100th year. Let me just congratulate the student athletes. I mean, you're really an inspiration. I just try to go to as many events as I can, the athletic events as I can, and I just marvel at your talent. It really is just exceptional. But it's not just the athletic talent, but the work that you do in the classroom to deserve the honor of this lunch so that we can recognize not only your athletic accomplishments, but what you do in the classroom. And I know, having been a student athlete myself, how difficult that is. You know, one of the things that I'm sure that during the course of today, you're going to hear a lot of statistics about how great the students are and the grade point averages and everything. I'm not going to repeat them, but there's just one that I just find really just mind-blowing. And that is that 32 of our student athletes had a perfect 4.0 term GPA. I just think that's extraordinary. And if that's not enough, you know, great athletic ability, great in the classroom. You know, our students also spend so much time making the community better. 10,000 service hours, at least 10,000 service hours in each of the past 6 years. That to me is also just really phenomenal. I've challenged the university community for our sesquicentennial year to put in 150,000 service hours for the whole university. I think the athletic program is going to put a big dent in that by itself. So thank you very much. Some of you are seniors. I look forward to hopefully seeing you in a few weeks during the commencement ceremony. For those of you who are seniors, I just want to say that I will miss you, but I am absolutely confident that Wayne has prepared you for whatever it is that you're going to be doing next. For you to be able to have the kind of commitment that you had to have to excel on both the athletics and in the classroom, you've learned a lot, and I'm sure you'll be successful in whatever it is you do next. I look forward to seeing you in a few weeks, but to all the student athletes, congratulations.
Good morning, everybody. First thing I want to say is I'm Deontay Nicholas, football student athlete here, our SAC president. First thing I want to do is thank all the faculty, staff, professors, administrators. You guys do so much for us. We are so appreciative of everything you guys do. What you guys do does not go unnoticed, and we really appreciate it. With that being said, on behalf of the student athletes here, we want to welcome you guys to the 2018 Academic Recognition Luncheon. Thank you.
You know, it's always about the message. When I was in grad school, I remember taking a class, and the school was new to me, so I didn't really know anybody. And I remember going into the class one day, and the professor walks in, and there was about 8 of us that made up the class. Well, 2 days later, when we were supposed to meet again, I was sitting in the classroom all by myself. And I thought, well, maybe they changed the class location. Well, not long after that, Dr. B walks in, and he says, everybody else has abandoned this class but you. Are you staying? And I looked at him incredulously, and he said, well, if you stay, I'll continue to teach the class. And so I did. We were on a quarter system, so twice a week, I went to the class, he stood behind a podium, and I sat in the second row, and occasionally he would ask a question. But the thing that I remember, at the end of every class, he would say, Mr. Fournier, what was the message today? The message. So the president talked about the president of the NCAA, Dr. Mark Emmert, coming to Wayne State the other day to celebrate our W Day and the centennial of intercollegiate athletics here. Dr. Emmert is a pretty busy guy. There's over 1,200 schools in the NCAA, over 500,000 student athletes, coaches, athletic directors. He's got a lot of places he could go. Ivy League schools, Big Ten schools, SEC schools, Pac-12 schools. You get the picture. But he chose to come to Wayne State. I thought that was kind of remarkable. You see, he liked our message. Academic success, community service, graduation, and compliance integrity. He wasn't coming here to do an investigation. He was coming to send a message to all of you for the great job that you're doing. You know, people are always asking me, well, how do the student athletes do it? I mean, you heard some of the numbers. 46.37% of all our student athletes have a 3.5 or better. Every team, no exceptions, every team has a cumulative grade point average of at least a 3.05. And then it goes up. Those are just remarkable numbers. And the ASR, the federally mandated graduation rate, in which they track over a 6-year cycle student athletes who receive aid and those that don't receive aid but a letterman's jacket, that graduation rate is 83%. And community service? You know, Jason just said, over 10,000 for the 7th consecutive year. That's mind-numbing. Find me another school in the country that does that. Mark Emmert couldn't. I've got a better way to put that in perspective. If every student who's a full-time Wayne State student on this campus did the same number of community service hours that the student athletes do, that number is over 750,000 hours. We're not going to make a perfect world, but we're going to make a better one. You know, a lot of that success goes to people that do a lot of work behind the scenes. People think there's some magic dust that we drop, or we're sometimes somehow threatening kids. But a culture in an athletic department is like a culture at a university. It's like a culture in an organization. It's like a culture in a business. You have to create a culture where people want to be successful, where they worry a little bit more about outcomes than they do about incomes. We've got some great people helping us out, and I want to introduce a couple of them to you today. Candace Howard, our senior women's administrator, is back there. She does all kinds of stuff to make sure the program works. Dr. Laurel Whalen, who coordinates our learning specialists. Ashley Lacita, who oversees all the community events and things that we do. Kim Klexton, one academic advisor for nearly 400 student athletes. She does all of that herself. And Kelsey Meyer, our compliance person who makes sure everybody stays eligible and on track. Actually, I think I know why we do so well. We're run by women. I always tell people, we may not get the most gifted athlete, but I guarantee you this, if we get them, we're sure in the hell going to make sure that that parent's most precious gift is going to succeed. Nick Ang is a junior member of our men's tennis team. His goal is to go to medical school. He's had a 4-point every semester he's been here, so I think he's in pretty good shape right now. Anyway, a few months ago, I was at a restaurant having lunch, and the owner came in and said to me, "Hey, Rob, one of your student athletes comes here regularly." Not wanting to disparage the restaurant, I was like, "To eat lunch?" And he's like, "No." He says he comes by at the end of the day and takes the prepared food that we would normally throw out that's been untouched and collects it and then takes it to shelters. You see, Nick Ang found out that the shelters often turn away people because there's no food to give them. So Nick came up with an idea, formed an organization, the Detroit Feedback Loop, in which he takes student athletes and they go around to all these restaurants and collect food at the end of the day and then take it to the shelters. He saw a problem and solved it. Do you know that it's estimated annually 72 billion pounds of food are thrown away that's usable? Nick has collected over 4,300 pounds of food to provide a little over 3,000 meals to people that are going to those shelters at night. Nick, stand up. I don't know what it is about the name Nick, but Nick Matebe is a member of our men's basketball team. He can't be here because he's at the NCAA today being orientated for a new program. But Nick decided to graduate early. I know Coach Greer isn't excited about that, but that's how you get to 83%. Anyway, Nick is part of a project called Open Doors. Nick's parents were born in Uganda, and he realized that kids with special needs in that country don't get any schooling. They're actually abandoned by their families. Now, in our pristine world, we can't quite understand that. But Nick wanted to go beyond understanding. He wanted to go and help the problem. So he organized over a course of weeks, with the help of his fellow student athletes, to collect clothing and supplies to send to Uganda. Can you imagine the message that was sent to those families and those kids in special needs when they opened up those boxes and saw that gift from a Wayne State men's basketball team player? By the way, all 5 members of that senior class of the men's basketball team are going to graduate. Coach Greer is out there somewhere. Coach, can you stand up? It's not just support personnel. It's coaches and staff who have to buy into that approach in order to be successful. As part of our centennial campaign, we tied it into the Medal of Honor. The reason we did that was those stories of those acts of heroism were unbelievable. we've been recognized all over the country for it, but that wasn't the purpose behind it. No, I was encouraged by the fact that when those student athletes were given that particular name that they represented, they took the time to look up that bio and to research what that person did. Amazing stories. Amazing messages. I have one of those messages here today. There's only 5 recipients of the Medal of Honor from the Korean War that are still alive. And I invited one of them here today. Bob Simonek is sitting over here at my table. And Bob's story is an amazing story. He graduated from Mackenzie High School here in Detroit. And like all young kids coming out of high school back then, he went to work in the automobile plant. But the Korean War broke out, and he soon found himself in a faraway country. Now, for people that are less than 50 years old, the Korean War doesn't really mean much. It seems inconsequential. Just another conflict in history's amazing lineage of wars. But don't tell that to Bob. And don't tell that to the people of South Korea. This was a fight between democracy and totalitarianism. This was a battle between people having the right to choose their own destiny and a despot controlling it. You know, people wonder why that cloak of freedom is out there. I can tell you this. There's nobody leaving South Korea to go to North Korea. You can see a difference between those two countries. And if you don't believe me, Google auto warm beer sometime. Well, Bob joined the Marines. He joined it because, well, his 2 uncles had been in World War II and they were Marines. And he liked the physicality of the Marines. He was a basketball player and thought that he could handle whatever they gave him. And he could. And it wasn't long before he found himself in Korea. You know, we often forget those acts of sacrifice, those people in their youth who gave up so much, people who traveled to countries for people they never met and countries they never knew. Many of them gave everything. Bob was one of the lucky ones. He had been there about 6 months in August of 1952 when the sergeant approached him. Bob was relaxing on his cot because he had been on night patrol. The sergeant told him that he was now going on a patrol up to an area near Panmunjom, a place called The Hook. It was Outpost Irene, is what the Marines called it. To underscore how ferocious the fighting was, the American Marines would take it during the day with the help of superior air support, and then retreat from the position at night as swarms of North Vietnamese and Chinese regulars attacked. Seemingly, the communist leaders were immune to the slaughter as they would just pour more and more men into the conflict. Well, on this particular day, Bob, who was relaxing on his cot, was told to get up and go. They were going to go back up the ridge. He was going to join a group of other 15 Marines, and the sergeant added this other admonition: you're going to work the radio too. Now the thing was, Bob had never worked the radio. So much for high tech. But the patrol of those 16 Marines headed up the slope. Here was fortuitous part. The enemy was waiting in bunkers for them. But the platoon leader, the sergeant, did not go the normal way. He got lost and went another way. When the platoon got to the ridge, all the fighting broke out because the enemy had been hidden in the bunkers that the Americans had previously built. It was a tremendous firefight. As the skirmish began, the other 10 Marines heard the order to retreat and went back. But Bob and the other 5, there was no escape. They took refuge in a trunk and a bunker. Well, the firefight continued, and they were badly outnumbered, and they were badly outgunned. On top of that, the other 5 Marines with Bob were tank artillery, so they weren't used to hand-to-hand combat. They weren't used to the ferocity of the fight that they were in. At one point, Bob is injured by a grenade, and the fight continues. His pistol jams because of the rapidity of the fire, so he yells to another Marine to throw him another pistol, and just then, a grenade landed in the trench. Bob had already thrown one away, but this one landed amidst the other 5 Marines. And Bob dove on the grenade and covered it, absorbing the impact into his legs. He said later that when he realized it, he didn't really feel anything. He said, I couldn't tell my legs were there. And amazingly, he said there were no blood, just holes. But Bob didn't give up. He got on the radio, he called in the air support, and then crawled on his knees up and down the trench line, firing at the enemy for another 2 hours. All the while the other Marines were dumbstruck by what had happened, and he called in artillery support. After 2 hours, surprisingly, the enemy retreated, and they started back down the hill. 2 Marines that weren't injured carried a badly injured Marine down the hill. 2 other Marines that were severely injured got down the hill by themselves. And Bob, he crawled down on his hands and knees. He was immediately air flighted to a hospital ship in the Gulf, and then to Japan, and after months of rehabilitation, finally to California, which was the first time he could call his parents. Communication was a little different in 1952. He spent 6 months in rehabilitation learning how to walk. And almost 1 year to that day, on August 17th, 1952, he found himself at the White House in the Rose Garden, where President Eisenhower presented him with the Medal of Honor. But here is the great part of the story. Private First Class Robert Semenek, Company F, 2nd Battalion, 1st Marine Division, went back to school and got a degree in business in 1958. And he got that degree from Wayne State University. He's one of ours. I didn't want Bob to stand up because he's been standing up for people a long time. Next week, he turns 88 years old. It's the first time in over 60 years he's been back to campus. He said, "You guys changed this thing a little bit." I said, well, we moved some buildings, we painted, but it's pretty much the same. Your name is your message. Bob's name is sacrifice, service, and selflessness. And I have to tell you, when I look out over all these student athletes, I see a message too. I wonder if you see the same message that I see. Congratulations. Semper Fidelis. Go Warriors!